Hi, my name is Tyler Duffy, and I'm the host of the Building the Bridges to a Better Future podcast. I was born and raised in Lacombe, Alberta, spending my formative years growing up on a buffalo ranch. After high school, I became a power engineer and spent 11 years working in the energy industry. I left that career behind and moved on to study a psychology degree at Red Deer Polytechnic. While completing that degree, I read one thing that stuck in my head that began to change my thinking, shape my beliefs, and ultimately guide my decisions from that point forward. The Canadian Mental Health Association had published some research that said that 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Let me say that again. 80% of lifelong mental health issues have their root in early childhood trauma. Now that got me thinking. Does that mean that 80% of lifelong mental health issues are preventable? So research has shown that early childhood trauma is one of the major causes to lifelong mental health issues. So I feel, as a society, we should recognize that and implement programs to reduce, buffer, and eliminate early childhood trauma. Otherwise, we will never be taking a preventative approach to mental health issues. We will be locked in a perpetual process of reacting to mental health issues when they surface later on in life. Like the old saying goes, rather than mop up the bleeding, you gotta stop the bleeding. Now, this was new information to me, but professionals in psychology, education, and the social work world are well aware of this. And community leaders in Red Deer had started to create programs to address this issue by increasing the amount, variety, frequency, and quality of social support the kids get at critical stages in their social and emotional development. The hypothesis is that if we implement positive social support programs for youth and maintain them over years so that they become a permanent part of the Canadian culture, then it may be possible to turn the tide and begin a downward trend in the number of people that struggle with mental health issues in future generations. In this podcast, we will be interviewing the key people that created these programs and have worked tirelessly for 20 years to maintain them. The goal is to share what we've done in Red Deer, why we have done it, and how you can do the same in your community if you're passionate about taking a preventative approach to mental health as well. Come and check it out as we begin to build the bridges to create a better future. That kind of popped up, triggered a thought. When I hammered it through this literature review, I remember there was one study I read that had identified that there's 3 things that develop positive self-esteem in kids, sort of thing, right? And this is really overlapping with the 40 developmental assets, because the 3 things were positive or reflected appraisals from others, right?
Alternate mirrors.
Yep, your alternate mirrors, exactly, right? So it's just straight up somebody telling you, and I think tone of voice is key for that to work, right?
Right.
You know, they have to do it in a kind of an affectionate kind of way. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel like it was positive, even though you said positive words. If the tone is negative,
Well, it has to be authentic.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, positive reflective appraisals was a very strong influential factor in developing self-esteem. The other one was social comparisons. And then the third one was just was self-appraisals, right? So that's, you know, obviously positive reflective appraisals is an external developmental assets. Social comparisons is also external,
right,
as well, because that's, you're comparing yourself to a benchmark, others as a benchmark, right? And be like, well, you know what, I placed 8th in that running race, so I feel like crap now, right?
Right,
But if you win that race, then you're feeling good. And then the other one was self-appraisals, which is obviously an internal developmental assets.
Well,
So
and
it
it's
feels-
interesting about the middle one because, like, I'm not a fan of Tony Robbins. I don't want you to get me be wrong about that. But one thing that he said, part of his shtick early on that resonates with me, the only thing I ever took away from Tony Robbins is you got to look at other people that are successful, find out what they do, what are the conditions of that success, and just copy it. So that's kind of like that, what you're talking, the number two social comparison. Because you can look at it as 8th place is, you know, the 8th loser or the 7th loser after the one winner, or you can look at it as, okay, what did the 7 people ahead of me do? Because I got to do more of that and come back again. And that's what a resilient person would look at it as.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of, so this is kind of leading into the structure of the Grow Kids Day sort of thing, right? Because so I don't know if this is a very good question or not.
Before you ask, I just wanted to add one more thing about
Go ahead.
self-esteem.
Yeah.
I find self-esteem to be one of the hardest words to define, or hardest terms to define, because it's of the self. Like, who the hell am I to tell you what you need to do to have your self-esteem? You know, it's intensely personal.
Yeah.
So I've been racking my brain for years, and this is what I came up with. I think there are only 2 conditions to arrive at a state of positive self-worth or self-esteem. And the first one is you have to be good at something. But that's also relative, because even if you're horrible at something, the external forces in your life need to help you believe that you're awesome at it. You know, it's that whole, like, a kid in grade 1 or kindergarten paints a picture and they bring it to you. That has to be the best painting you've ever seen in your life, right?
Yeah.
And they need to understand that. But I've already telegraphed the second step. You could be, well, you're a guitar player. If you were the best guitar player in the world and you lived at the top of, you know, Mount Robson and in a cabin and nobody ever heard you play the guitar, would it improve your self-esteem? Probably not. You know, like, there's only so much self-actualization that you can do. But you need to have some kind of feedback. Yeah. So it's feeling relatively good at something, but the necessary element, step 2, is that you have to have opportunity to share with other people who will provide you with that positive feedback.
Positive reflective appraisal or whatever. Yeah, 100%.
So I tried to simplify it in my own head because I struggle with that one. Like,
yeah, it is a tough concept.
Yeah,
for sure.
Anyways.
So let's go kind of like back into the we'll call it, it's rebranded as the Grow Kids Day,
right,
kind of thing. At this point, that the 3 episodes coming up to this, we've talked. That's more or less all we've talked about. We don't need to cover the framework of any of it or anything like that. But so the way the day is structured, how many developmental assets is it checking off the box with the way it's structured? Because we're, you know, like it's we maybe I'll just reiterate it just in case somebody hasn't watched the first 3 episodes. What happens on the Grow Kids Day is we take every kid in grade 5, boys and girls, which is pushing 2,000 kids. We split them up into 2 groups. The girls go to one school, the boys go to the other. We split those groups into clans of about 30. And then we have about 5 or 6 mentors, we call them clan leaders, that lead the clans through different activities throughout the day that are all focused on positive development sort of thing. So that's the structure of the day, and we do that once a year in Red Deer, and it's been running for, the girls program's been running for 21 years now, the boys program's been running for 12, I think, sort of thing. So with a framework like that, how many developmental assets, or maybe not how many, but what developmental assets are being checked off? Because initially looking at it is you're giving them a positive role model for the day for sure with the clan leaders, right? So, well,
the answer is 0.
Okay. That's different than I was expecting, but
and the reason for that is it's a 1-day event, you know, like, and it's a great event, but it's not enough to have long-lasting, impactful change in the lives of these kids, because of what you just asked. You know, like we can, it's kind of like, a child who's living in poverty and somebody sponsors them for Christmas with a Christmas dinner, and they get a dinner that year, but then they don't for another 5 years. Mm-hmm. They're going to remember that dinner. It was going to be fun. They're probably going to take some really positive takeaways from that, but it's also, it's not sustainable. So in order for the assets to kick in, like they actually have, like there are like zones of participation, like targeted zones. So the ones that pertain to extracurricular activities, it's 3 or more hours a week. One of them is involvement in some sort of religious pursuit for 3 or more hours a week. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not really, because if you play grade 5 basketball for 2 months, that's probably, well, that alone might be 2 or 3 hours a week. But if you're involved in that, and you also go to phys ed class, and you might join the Terry Fox Run Club, add all those things up, it's going to be 3 hours a week or 12 hours a month. Mm-hmm. So, but that has to be maintained and sustained over long periods of time in order for that to be habituated. So the idea is that the child ends up, there's an influence from outside, the opportunity is provided, they pick up the ball and run with it, but you have to keep replacing those things, because not too many of those things on their own would last an entire year. Our day lasts for only 1 day. Mm-hmm. So one of my goals for this project from day one has been to create a 365-degree or day a year context so that kids are accessing Grow Kids opportunities all year long.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, I guess, so maybe it's not meeting the developmental assets, but because I remember when we were, we were having those meetings about, how do we structure this day? The Go Girls program at the time was focusing just on teaching physical activity, because there's all sorts of long-term benefits with that, right? And we wanted to take that and kind of build on it, right?
Yeah.
So it was I remember we kind of coined the term in the initial brainstorming meetings, kind of like, let's shoot to make it like an identity formation trade show kind of thing, right? So let's give kids the chance to try all sorts of different activities, some of them sports, some of them team building, some of them art-based, some of them like different themes.
Yeah, it's like a flight of beer.
Right? Yeah. Right.
But unless you know the addresses of all the microbreweries that you can go and try that one again, or maybe what we do, and I know that Grow Kids at the Collicut does the same, is we provide kids with with information that would allow them to connect with some of the people that they met who are facilitating sessions during the day. So for example, you had a martial arts instructor, we make sure that those kids know who that person is and how to get a hold of them, in the fortunate event that they have the resources to sign up and continue those lessons. Yeah. So, but we can't know if they actually are able to follow through with that. Yeah. We do know that some will never be able to, because they don't have, the privileges of some others. Yeah. So then in my mind, I'm like, yeah, what we do is awesome, but is it enough? And my answer will always be no, because if you're not improving, you're not improving. And I like to be continually trying to improve. So I'm getting a little anxious about Grow Kids, because I feel like we need to take the next evolutionary step into the community, so that everybody in Red Deer knows Grow Kids to be an agency, an organization, a project that nurtures the happy, healthy, well-adjusted development of young people all year long. Mm-hmm. So that's going to take some work, obviously, and some commitment, but it's not impossible.
It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. Like we're providing that flight, that sample, right? Yeah. And we're exposing kids to really good outlets. We just don't have the means currently to make sure that they're connected to those outlets.
Gotcha.
So I think Grow Kids has to grow in context. Okay. It's probably time that we're past addressing boys and girls specifically, and just address kids at that age level. Because I know that a lot of the issues that get addressed, like for example, body image, That's not an exclusive to girls issue.
No,
You know,
definitely not.
we don't address it specifically on our end anyways, but you know, like, is there room for a conversation about body image for kids, just generally speaking? You know, so I kind of, and you know, Denise and I have had a couple of conversations about this. Like, is there room for a conversation around evolving the mandate, even of the one-day event, so that it's more inclusive to kids with, you know, with issues that aren't as perhaps gender specific as what we once thought them to be in a stereotypical way.
Gotcha. Well, I guess so. I think it does. You know, it might not meet the developmental assets, but I think there's the potential for it to. And there is lots of examples of it, but
yeah.
But the kind of in the framework that was built into it was, I remember the concept of expressive identity came up in the literature review, and I remember what I learned from that is that what they find in individuals who have lifelong mental health issues, right? What they find is that when they on identity scores, they either have no expressive identity or too many, sort of thing. So
yeah, well, I totally buy that. Like
Yeah.
I was saying earlier about that critical pre-adolescent, sort of preteen age group. Like you don't, I mean, I'm sure like there's an intrinsic feeling of, you know, who I am in early childhood, but it's not gonna, you know, like the variables that impact that are much less prevalent than they are when you get into middle school, and all of a sudden there's 700 kids in your school instead of 200, and they're coming from all walks of life, and so the diversity kind of hits them right in the face. And they're out and about doing things in the community, meeting other kids. So yeah, and for some it's overwhelming, for others it's stifling, for others it's completely enabling. It just depends on their private logic at the time. So that whole, I think you're 100% right, and the literature is correct that is the most critical moment in a human being's life in terms of their own self-perception. Because
is that late childhood to early adolescent developmental
100%.
range. Yeah.
And I mean, it even matches the biology of it all, with the prefrontal taking off at that time. It's the second most active time in a human being's life for brain development, next to the first 5 years.
Yeah.
From there, it's downhill. So, you know, like, we got to tap into this, you know, and I just don't think that our structures match that reality very well. And that's why I just refer to it generally as the algorithm. You know, we know what leads up to that. We actually even know what comes after it. We just got to really nail it in those critical 3-4 years from, say, 10 to 14.
Yeah, so that's kind of one idea I've thought too. So just to finish off the expressive identity thing, like, would that, because I know there is some kids that have gone to the nights in training day or whatever, tried something for the first time and then locked into it, and like that's it. Like, they're, you know, now they're adults and
well, that's the hope,
right?
Yeah.
So is that developing resiliency then, or what? Because if they find something that they're passionate about, because essentially expressive identity is something that you're passionate about that you love doing, right? So for you, it's biking, lacrosse, skiing, that sort of stuff, right?
Right,
Like, those are the things that define you as an individual.
Yeah.
And if a person doesn't have that, then that's a risk factor, right? So is giving them the opportunity to find an identity developing resiliency then, if it's not checking off your developmental assets?
No, it doesn't. And here's
what positive effect is it having then?
Well, so you remember Henry Williams played football in Edmonton?
Yes.
Gizmo?
Yeah.
So when he retired from football, he kind of went on a speaking tour, and he spoke a lot to school-age kids. And he was really good at it. Like, you remember, he's a character with the backflips and everything else. I kind of knew him a little bit from the gym when I was in college, because we worked out at the stadium. And he quite often, he said, I received the comment a lot where Like football saved my life. He came from a very adverse childhood situation with lots of siblings and illness in the family, and parents died when they were young, and all are really, really horrifying stuff. So they say, well, you're so lucky that football saved you. And he goes, no, football didn't save me at all. I said, somebody asked me, saw me in a hallway in middle school, and they said, you look like you'd be good at football. So I said, I joined football, and it turns out I was good at football, but it wasn't football that saved my life. It was the people that football put me in front of that saved my life. So I can be the best cyclist in the world, the best skier in the world, if I'm not interacting with other people who provide me with that positive alternate mirror reflection of why what I'm doing is good, and it's exposing me to their ideas and my ideas to them, and it's a social thing, and the endorphins get rolling and we feel that together. It's kind of like a shared experience. That's what grows your resiliency.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a little more deeper than finding the expressive identity.
Yeah.
It's the connections you make
Exactly.
in the pursuit of that expressive
Because
identity.
number one factor in a resilient person is love and care. And that has to come from other people, right? Extrinsically. I mean, we can have self-love and self-care, but like when I'm downstairs riding the trainer on Zwift, I'm certainly doing self-care, but I hate every second. You know, there's no, like I can even connect with White. He's in Calgary, and we'll get on the same course together, and we, talk through the headphones and the mic and stuff, but it's not the same as feeling the wind together and the birds are chirping.
Together. Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
It's visceral when you're in person and you're really being present for each other.
Gotcha.
So that's the key difference, right? Like skiing doesn't define who I am. Skiing's just something that I do.
Yeah.
How I relate to other people, how I present myself, the interactions we have with nature, it's visceral. That's part of the way I define myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that dove me a little deeper down the understanding of identity. So, hey, you learn something sometimes,
well,
right?
the logic begs, right?
Yeah.
What if somebody did nothing?
Yeah.
Can they still have positive self-identity?
I don't know.
Well, I think, of course they can, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody has nothing. It's just like what we do is what we do, and it's related to the way we feel about ourselves. But, a Buddhist monk doesn't do a lot of things, but they're pretty well adjusted human beings, right? They're centered, they're grounded. So how we think, how we interact with others, the way we perceive the world, the way we accept the world, the external part of the world, all of those things to me are the real, like the meat and potatoes of self-identity. All this other stuff is just fun. It's how you represent, how you project those more inner things that define who you are and how you feel about yourself.
It's the connections that with people that you get through doing that you feel is more important than doing it.
And the more for lack of a better term, the authenticity of me so I'm a kind person. I'm also kind when I'm skiing, but I'd still be kind if I didn't ski.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it provides you with a vessel to express your identity. And I would argue, I don't disagree with you. Like the more opportunities you have to express yourself through purposeful action, probably the easier it's going to be to express your identity.
Yeah.
Like that guy on the mountain who plays the guitar. If he doesn't have somebody to share it with, is that expressive identity or just being a really good guitar player?
Well, I guess that's kind of for me, because guitar playing for me was a big part of my expressive identity, and I didn't play for anybody. But what made me feel good about it, I guess it was connecting with the guitar.
Oh, fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, because I would set the metronome to beats per minute and then hammer up and down the scale, and then I would pump it up 5 beats, and I would go again.
Yeah.
And it was the process of pushing myself that gave me an outlet to cope with my stress, because when I did that, I wasn't stressed. No. The world melted away.
Yeah, well,
and I would do it for hours.
Yeah, and and maybe I'm just thinking about my purview of this is because I've been trying to learn how to play guitar for 25 years actually. Do you do lessons?
Yeah.
But music is interesting because whether you're just listening to it or actually playing it, there are some physical things that happen in your brain as a result. So I suppose that intrinsically that could necessarily be an esteem inducing or validating thing.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
the
so,
vibration
100%.
of the strings is, you know, you feel that, it's visceral. So maybe the word of the day is visceral. You got to feel things, actually feel them for them to be identifiable or real.
Yeah.
So based on Grow Kids the Day, maybe we are providing that opportunity for somebody, like maybe somebody's never been in a pool before.
Yep.
So yeah, you convinced me. But I still would say, well, we have to figure out how to like transfer that and allow that to perpetuate beyond the day. Because one great turkey dinner, one great dip in the pool, if it never happens again, it probably won't have the same kind of impact.
Gotcha. So let's while we're on that thought, because I currently don't know, because I work in the field as much as you do with kids and stuff. But so like, I think this day is great. The whole purpose for this podcast is to share this day, because I think if communities across the country and across the globe did it, I think it would be good for youth as a whole. I think that's pretty. I don't think you would argue with that. Right? I don't.
No, there's no way to criticize the day.
Yeah.
You know, the effort that's made is 100%
Positive.
Yeah, the intention behind it is good. The rationale behind it is good. The outcomes are all good. You know, I don't know if you ever heard Shel Buzzy on the radio. He used to do like AM Saturday morning home improvement show. The Shel Buzzy show is awesome. But he's sponsored by several different brands of paint and tools and you name it, building product. And he had this, he would go through the thing, good, better, and best. And the best would be, you know, the Glidden paint can. And here's why it's the best. Of course, he's getting paid to promote Glidden paint, right? So I would say that Grow Kids in different ways can be described as good, better, or best. But to me, the best, like A+ would be that people in the community, whichever community wants to host an event, there's a mechanism to extend that event so that people in the community understand what Grow Kids is and what they do. So you can call up the agency Grow Kids and say, hey, my son wants to be involved in Taekwondo. What do I do? Where do I go for that? You know, or the block, like I said, the block parent sign. And there's been snippets of that a lot, right? My friend Brian Ennis used to run sports equipment for kids for about 8 years. Yeah. And you literally show up at the door, a donated space at Mitcher. Then he had a place over at Border Paving, I think, donated spaces. And he'd supply the equipment that kids needed to get involved. It could be a bike, a ball glove, a set of golf clubs, whatever. Yep. And that was awesome. To me, there's no reason why something like that couldn't be run under the umbrella of Grow Kids Red Deer. Gotcha. So, you know, I just think there's opportunities for more reach.
I'd agree with you for sure. Okay, so yeah, my question is how do we grow the Grow Kids thing from where it's at? Because we've got that one day done, and I agree, it's not going to save the world. Yeah. But it's a positive tactic in the right direction. So it's one step of many. So in your mind, what are some of the next, now that foundation in place, how do we level up? What's another positive next step? Because I haven't really rabbit holed down that. Yeah. I've been too focused on raising awareness that this is happening, right? Yeah,
well, I mean, you know what contract work is like, right? Because you do it too, like in the film industry. And I know you well enough to know that you probably share my anxiety about the work that you do. I'm a landscaper in the summertime, right? And so I will get 100 compliments about that fence we built. Every time I drive by, all I see is that one screw that got broken in the hole. Yeah, and I couldn't get it out, right? And that's just my nature, you know. Probably a result of my cultural tale. I don't know. I don't want to overanalyze these things, but so to me, that's kind of the place we're at. Like I'm seeing, okay, this is awesome, but can it be even more awesome? You know, and I think that the way to do this is to rinse and repeat. I've been thinking all year this year, well, since last May when we had the 24 event, you know, maybe it's as simple as getting people together again, but this time we're not coming to them with a concept. We're coming to them with a tangible, real thing that has come to be a tradition almost in town. People expect this to happen. And okay, so now we have this event. It's very well established. How do we take this event and fan it out so that we can do more better things without overburdening people or overtaxing people? So I think the community, like, you know, there's a well-known phrase, it takes community to raise a child. I think of it the opposite way. I think of it as it takes a child to raise, as in call to action, the community. So I think the answer is we need to renew the call to action, you know, and there are lots of agencies doing lots of things, but most of them work in pretty siloed contexts. So even if it's just like a consolidation, so maybe Grow Kids becomes like a consulting agency that allows people to know where to go for outlets, for support, for whatever, you know, to help them raise their kids in ways that are conducive to positive, happy, healthy, well-adjusted young adults of the future. So that's what I would say. I think it's time. Maybe we're a little overripe on this actually, but COVID kind of threw a bit of a wrench in the machine there. So, but hopefully that's well in the past, and I think maybe this is the year where we need to get together with Denise and her people and call the community in, spend $500 on breakfast again, and just start talking about it, you know.
So yeah. Well, I guess what you're proposing is it like more creative meetings to be like, what ideas do we got to build on this?
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing?
And well, like the research you compiled, I don't think is invalidated because it was 12 years ago. Like, these same issues are very current.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a mystery what kids need from us in communities. It's just, where does the rubber meet the road? You know, and I don't think there's an agency out there that unilaterally can handle the job. So like I said, maybe Grow Kids becomes like a centrifugal force. It's kind of a binding agent to just to help people be aware of where they can go.
Yeah, because what created this events was people getting together and brainstorming together, and then, and then creative discussions that created something that didn't exist before. So,
well, we jumped off a cliff 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Right now, we need to jump off a curb.
Yeah.
Right, but we got to jump because, like, We Day, as big as it used to be, started as somebody saying, "Hey, we need to do something about, you know, poverty around the world and sustainable development and clean water and nutritious food. Maybe we should call it We Day," you know? So, like, I don't think there's a restrictive nature to this. Like, we have to think big. They were global, you know?
Okay, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, so and I can tell you, like, without even really trying, there has been a Grow Boys event in Zambia, in Africa. Yeah. My friend Michael was stroking the concept in Brooklyn until he passed away suddenly, so that didn't end up materializing. So there was a group in Lloydminster after our first year. They came and observed, participated. They were going to host an event in Lloydminster. I'm not sure if that ever ended up happening.
Reaching out to other communities and maybe just inviting them. Not inviting them to like come. Yeah. But, you know, instead of just doing it in our own little pocket, in our own little community.
It's kind of insular.
Contacting other communities and said, hey, you know what? We've been doing this for 20 years. It's great. It's one tactic of many that we have to employ, but, you know, because if people knew it was happening, I think they would probably authentically be like, that is a good idea.
Well, it will
Good
resonate.
idea, right?
Yeah, it will resonate.
For sure.
I kind of think of the metaphor like we're throwing one pebble in a pond right now. We got one ripple. If we throw a handful of pebbles in the pond, we get several ripples, and those ripples bump into each other and they create a new ripple. So it sort of becomes a systemic effort, right? So it's time to throw a handful of pebbles in the pond and see what happens. Like, we're not going to change anything about the day, really. I mean, I don't think anything really needs to be changed all that much. We might want to look at our programming a little bit and just how we're,
I think the framework of the day is good. Just maybe visiting the sessions and updating the sessions once in a while. Like, Leah and I kind of rabbit holed on this a little bit. And, like one of the thoughts that just kind of popped out of the back of my mind was, okay, well, we're only doing this for grade 5s. Why don't we have a Grow Kids Day?
Well, we're not though, really.
Well,
no,
okay.
because one of the unanticipated positive outcomes of Grow Kids, even when it was very much grow boys and go girls, well, and I'm not sure what Denise would say, but I'm pretty sure she would have similar story. We didn't anticipate at all how much this was impacting the high school volunteers.
True. So I guess for the high school kids and the grade 5.
Yeah.
But what I was kind of getting at is, what if there was a similar event for grade 1s through grade 8s? You know what I mean? So it's not just one grade being the mentors or whatever each year. What if we did it for each grade each year?
Well, and I really love the idea of the 5th grade just because of my...
It's that critical stage.
Yeah, it's right there in the zone, right? Yeah. But like... getting away from the one-day event, I completely agree that there are lots of things we can do across the grade spectrum in a Grow Kids context without the logistical challenges of getting all these kids together. You remember nights in training, even how hard that was with a dozen high school kids, just trying to get them to the elementary school, and how are we getting them there, and who has a driver's license, are they even allowed to drive, and all that stuff. So if we could bring Grow Kids to the people, in the school, and develop some curriculum, some project work, some, maybe leadership groups need to be called Grow Kids Club or whatever, Teachers are creative. There's lots of things we can do to start framing an awareness of the imperative of Grow Kids without hosting an event for those age groups.
I think you've kind of popped open a door, and now I'm staring into this. Okay, there's all this space I haven't thought about yet, right?
Well, that to me, that's the key, right? Because one-day events are fun, but they're hard. Like organizationally, like we're doing it on our end with a shoestring. Like we got Adam, we got Jackie, me, we got Erica, and we got Tatiana. And a representative from Parks and Rec. That's it. Like there's 6 of us. I think Denise has a few more people involved. So it, and I to this day I have a blank credit card. I call it the Grow Boys. Well, we grow the GKC, because if the funding ever doesn't come through, I'm like I could not live with myself if we didn't pull this off. So luckily I've never had to use it. But. So I think the real catalyzing effort with Grow Kids would be to bring Grow Kids to the schools and create some content and some project sort of concepts that teachers could, without feeling that it's an extra burden on their time, just give them stuff that improves their workflow and starts to create a larger branding context around Grow Kids.
Yeah, because that's Lee and I kind of batted that idea around. Well, what if we did it for grade 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and then we just kind of hit the logic. It's like the logistics of making it happen once are hard enough. Imagine trying to make 7 of those events happen per year. It's like, so that's kind of the wall we hit. It's like,
and it would have to be so different at each age level, right? Like my wife teaches grade 1. Ask any teacher what it's like when they go to Mistletoe like Candy Cane Lane during Mistletoe Magic. It's like, and you need volunteers, and the ratio for younger kids is way tighter. 1 for every 10 kids. Or maybe it's 1 for every 4, I can't remember. But I mean, you can't just send 30 kids with a couple high school kids and some teachers like you can in grade 5. So, but I mean, that doesn't mean, and honestly, I like the idea more of kind of being more ubiquitously identifiable in the schools on a day-by-day basis. And just seeing that logo, like, if it could be as simple, Tyler, honestly, just to jump off that curve, to print up some Grow Kids stickers and make sure there's one on the front door of every school. So like, people are seeing it, parents see it, kids see it, and then we start working on the language. Okay, what is this all about, and what teachers need to know about this? It just start slow and small, incrementally, offer some content, and maybe there's another, maybe it's time to revisit the mentorship thing. Like, I know Greg will be talking about that. So high school kids, we're already doing it, to be honest. The comm class at Thurber for 2 years now, Jamie Seiler brings them down to Joseph Welsh, and they just spend a half hour working with kids.
Nice.
That is an asset, because they do it over a long period of time, asset building thing. And so that's already happening. We just need to call it a Grow Kids mentorship opportunity. So I think branding is key, you know. And then
kind of where it's kind of landed me is kind of on the, you know, what created the Nights and Training Day. Well, we had that knowledge cafe, and then we had numerous brainstorming meetings. So it's, to me, like, the only answer I can come up with is how we grow it. We got to have some meetings and brainstorm.
No, well, I mean, God forbid we have to have a meeting, but you know, I'm all about a meeting that has a humble, 100% ironclad purpose behind it. And clearly this does. I mean, the stakes are high, and if we can have an impact, you know, like, I think the cost benefit ratio is pretty good. So
yeah, to me, I feel the only way that we'll see mental health rates drop in the coming decades is focusing on that early childhood development range.
Well, yeah, like, well, that's the buck stopping. Yeah. That's the cycle breaking, you know. And what we've talked,
it's stopping the bleeding.
Yeah, and what we've talked about, and what we've talked about resiliency, like, it's not a mystery. We know through research that already exists that kids who are resilient or who are supported in becoming more resilient will likely turn out just fine. But we have to make that effort and know how to do it in ways that are effective. So Grow Kids is an opportunity to do that. It just needs, I think it needs to grow into other contexts.
I agree 100%.
So what, can I get your donation for 250 stickers? No, just
All right, let's serve the ball to Ryan and hit us with whatever you got.
You did answer a lot of my questions as it kind of went on.
Well, ask them anyways, because it might trigger different trains of thought.
Sure. How did your time at like the Code 42 schools help kind of influence the ideology of Grow Boys when you went to build it?
Well, you know, that's a great question. I think that myself included, all human beings are a sum total of all of the experiences they've ever had. You add all that up and you get, you know, your worldview, so your private logic. So for me, before I worked in alternative schools, I worked in band-run schools in First Nations communities. So a lot of what, like Tyler Shirt's The Hope Wheel, that's a medicine wheel model that's been developed by me since my very first year teaching at Tallcree. So, you know, elders helped me come up with this stuff. So when I would say that what I brought from my experience working with First Nations people to Venture Code 42 program was more prominent than what I took away purely from the Code 42 program. Because I didn't develop this specifically until I moved to Red Deer and started working in that program. And it wasn't because we had a lot of First Nation students. We didn't, to be honest. It was just because I felt really passionately that there's something to this I got to try and figure out. So this Hope Wheel was developed during the years I spent in the alternative school program with those kids. We did listening circles, people call them talking circles, which I think is kind of silly because only one person ever talks at a time. The rest of them are listening, so we call it a listening circle. And so I guess my time in the alternative programs allowed me to you kind of like really focus heavily on what I brought there already, and it gave me a really good like environment to experiment and do action research around those Indigenous ways of knowing and learning and being and understanding to a group of kids that weren't necessarily Indigenous, but certainly benefited from the perspective. So it was like a proving ground almost, like a little laboratory school environment, if that makes sense. And of course, you know, I also started thinking a lot about empathy. We started another project called Empathy Reboot there, because what we found common trait amongst those kids is that none of them felt comfortable in their previous school environment, and nobody ever asked why until they got to the program. And we learned very quickly that we needed to know what they thought about everything before we even tried to do a test on fractions. You know, because they would tell us where to go and how fast to get there otherwise. So it was about relationship building and not judging, trying to learn that story behind their story so we could put the pieces of the puzzle together and try and meet them. Like we weren't pushing, we weren't pulling, we're just walking alongside. And that took well, I was there for 7 years, and I'm no expert after even all that time. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
Just to add to that, I remember one thing that came out of this too is that kids that are struggling emotionally, they literally can't learn, right? Like it.
No,
the
amygdala is in full like fight, flight, or
exactly.
Fight, flight, or fawn, right?
Yeah. So there's one specific finding that came out of this is that if you want to improve academic scores, the research programs that attempted to strictly improve academic scores had no successful results at all. The ones that were successful in improving academics were the ones that focused on helping kids deal with their stress.
Well, there's
if you help them deal with their stress so they can cope with that, then now they're capable of learning and their academic scores go up. But if you just try and improve the academic scores without addressing those emotional things, it ain't gonna work.
It's a deal breaker. There's a kind of a edge-celebrity type writer out there called Nell Noddings, and this isn't a direct quote, but she said something along the lines of children will do really strange things, like even super strange things like adding fractions for people that they love and trust.
There's some depth to that statement, isn't there? There's
several
some
layers
insight to that,
So like the 3 R's, the new age of 3 R's is relationship. Don't even broach the math test until you have that. It's it just won't happen.
All right, hit us with another one.
This one was sort of answered before, but how could schools kind of help bring like identity formation into like a day-by-day basis? Like how would you try and focus on that through just the school curriculum?
I have an answer. I have an automatic answer to that, but this is not something this is a systemic problem, in my opinion. I'm not speaking on anybody's behalf. The way that school system is structured, the Western school system right now, it's a pyramid that's, in my mind, upside down. So when kids are in kindergarten, grade 1 to 3, right up until junior high or middle school, everything they do is prescribed to them, literally. You know, and I mean, there's some good rationale behind that. Like you're trying to acquire literacy, there's certain things need to happen for that to be successful. But to me, it's no, and as a middle school counselor at one time, as you know, this was really troubling for me because one of the largest issues we had back in the day with middle schools is trying to get kids hooked up with their option classes. And I thought, why is this so hard? You know, how can they not know? Well, they don't know because that's the first time in their entire educational career that they're allowed to make an independent choice about something. Right? And then that just happens all over again in grade 9 because they're so anxious about these options. A lot of times they don't feel success. Sometimes they were so confused about what to do, they just got placed in options that they actually didn't even choose for themselves. So they start to fail and not, thrive. And then in grade 9, here we go again. And so I would love to see the pyramid flipped upside down. So the base is the broad side in the lower grades. So kids are given a little more, or maybe a lot more, agency to pick and choose the things that they do and their interests on, opportunity to try more things in a less prescriptive way. So by the time they get to middle school, I kind of know what I like and what I identify with. And then high school, it just keeps getting finer and sharper as they go. To me, that's a more logical approach, but I understand fully. I'm one guy with one opinion, and the whole entire system would have to change. Perhaps there's some room for a pilot or an action research project to broach that a little bit. I know we were trying to do it at Glendale. We did a lot of that kind of stuff. We had opportunity there, though. We had privilege. We had a full industrial arts shop, a full food studies kitchen, a full band set up. So kids in grade 1, when they're doing structures in their curriculum, could literally go down with balsa wood in the shop and do that. But not every school is set up like that. And we were finding great success and great results by doing. Well, you might remember, when you were there, did we do Kane's Cardboard Challenge? No, that would have been later. So that is just an example of something that grade 8 kids are working with first grade kids, building things out of cardboard for an entire day, just in the sake of creativity and ingenuity. That's not typical in elementary school.
I would resonate a lot of what Sean's saying. He works in schools and has his whole life, so I respect what he has to say 100% on that, because I don't have that teaching background, but I have read some articles and stuff like that where it's and this is kind of just coming from my personal feelings too. I think kids naturally want to learn, so I think if you embrace their intrinsic motivation, and instead of being like, okay, all of you sit down, we're learning math today, right? Rather than that approach, like a lot with what Sean's saying is like, have the kids in the classroom, and then maybe the teacher's role is to sit there and observe, and then they're going to naturally come up with and curious about something, and when they do, grab onto that and nurture them in that direction, right? And then you're going to find creative ways to help them learn math.
Yeah.
Because but they're kind of leading the ship, and you're kind of like, I don't know if this is a good analogy, but you're kind of like, rather than driving the horse and telling it where to go, you're just giving the horse what it needs to get where it's going to go.
So just to feedback about what you said, being a teacher's grade 1.
Yeah.
So for decades, she's framed her class as the wondering ones. So she takes an inquiry-based approach to things, and she starts virtually every lesson with, I wonder. And so the child has to finish that statement. So they're literally going into every curricular outcome with an inquiry-based context coming from the child. So she'll provide some background, to the topic, or let's say they're counting 10, simple example. So they'll talk about numbers and why they're a thing and what we use them for and where do you see them and how do you say them and how do you write them. And then she'll ask them, well, what else, what do you wonder about 1 to 10 or numbers in general? And you would not believe some of the stuff that they come up with, right? So it sort of speaks to what you're saying. Kids need to have some semblance of agency over what they're learning. I mean, we can't not teach the curriculum,
Yeah.
but we can present it in a way so kids understand that they should be the primary driver of their own process.
Yeah, and I think you would get, the fire would take off, and you'd have, keeping it on the track would be all you got to do. And when they hit a wall where they get confused, they're going to ask questions, right?
Yeah.
So I think giving them some agency to, and to direct their learning.
Yeah.
So some teachers like Bina are already doing that. But
Yeah.
So that's kind of like a unique to her teaching.
Right.
Her
Yeah.
teach
So how do you
specific style.
transfer that so it's so everybody understands how important that is. That's a big task.
Yeah, and that's so one thing, because I did on that research that I did with Greg on those 2 years of mentorship research, I did present that at a couple conferences, and there's one thing that popped up that resonates right along with this, which was student-led learning.
Right.
Kind of thing, right? And I was like, okay, so that sounds good. So it was like, the form that we had is we had a curriculum, and then the high school kids learned that curriculum and taught that curriculum to the kids, right? So that's kind of teacher-led learning, right? So what student-led learning would do is kind of like would be, going to the kids and be like, okay, so what do you guys want to learn about, right? Okay, so you want to learn about what activity X, you want to learn about activity Y, you want to learn about B, right? Then take your mentors and be like, okay, so who wants to teach those, right? And then so that I think it would be a way to improve on the mentorship structure of the programs that Greg and I researched. It would be, rather than coming in with a curriculum, use the feedback of the group to develop a curriculum. So that's my answer to that. Did we answer your question thoroughly?
Yeah, I think so.
There?
Kind of on the same notes about like concepts from Grow Boys brought more into the forefront of schools, like you were talking about mentorships. In what way do you think you could bring like a mentorship program or some aspect of that from Grow Boys into the school forefront?
Well, we kind of accidentally stumbled upon one of those ways last year. In my other role, we work with, last year we had this idea. What if we addressed, because during COVID, they abandoned any form of congregated learning for a special purpose. And one of the things they used to do is the Healthy Active School Symposium. So leadership students from middle, elementary up to grade 12 would get together for a day and talk about how to be, for example, a good mentor, or how to run a mentorship program, among many other things. But it was all about in the context of leadership. So last year we reignited that under the title of Thriving Kids Conference, TKC. So the high school leaders from the leadership classes run the whole day. They had planned every session. We were very hands off. And the kids from 4 to grade 8 are the delegates of the workshop-based session. So then that happened in January, and you weren't there, but it just dawned on me, why aren't we soliciting high school kids to offer sessions at Grow Kid? Like they've been the guides, the supervisor, like sort of
Plan leaders.
Yeah, sort of like almost symbolic leaders, but they could also lead. So I invited probably 3 or 4 of the really, really well-received groups from the TKC, and they also came to Grow Kids, and they were outstanding. So that's one way. I know that there are other things that already happen. Like I mentioned, Jamie Sellers' comm class from Thurber. She brings them up once a week for an hour to Joseph Welsh, and they literally spend time one-on-one or one with a small group or running a dance club in the gym, and it's just fun. It's a way for them to understand how to take a more active role in as a mentor in the community. So I think the templates are all pretty easy to understand. Just the will and the drive behind it has to be a little more prominent.
What was that question again? I had
How would you rather bring like aspects of mentorship into the forefront of schools?
Well, like after that research that I did with Greg, I was like, well, this was positive, right? So this, and the logistics of this are an extreme challenge, but I was like, so this program was like, let's go with it. I think it was high school kids with grade 5 kids, but my kind of vision from that is, you know, what if every kid in the school system, every single year, they either received or delivered a mentorship curriculum, so it would become a part of, you know, and there's little elements of that like Jamie's program, but working towards what I, you know, what my long-term vision was, which and I could go down that thought process. That'll take us way off track. But what if, like, every single year, grade 6 is mentored grade 1s, grade 7 is mentored grade 2s, grade 8 mentored grade 3s,
Yeah.
like that sort of a thing, and that like became built into the structure. And like you said, you don't get long-term benefits unless it's not just one day.
Yeah.
It's weeks. And one of Denise's studies showed that some programs, if you take it past, it's got to go, in order to have observable and sustainable effects, it's got to be 8 weeks or longer, right? So, and the one that the Knights in Training research was 12 weeks, right? So, but yeah, so that was kind of the vision I had. The logistics to that are borderline impossible.
Yeah, well, in some
But
contexts,
in
yeah.
theory, what are your thoughts on that? What if every single year, every kid received a mentorship program until grade 7, and then flipped and was a mentor until they graduated?
Yeah, well, like you said, the logistics, the structural challenges are real, but like in the K-8 schools, it's very easy.
Yeah,
And
some schools
yeah,
it would work,
well,
yeah.
3 for sure, right? So in Glendale, we had it structured, like I set it up so that grade 5 worked with grade 1, grade 6 worked with grade 2, grade 7 worked with grade 3, grade 8 worked with grade 4. So there's always a 4-year gap, and they would just graduate to the next level. And it was
So they were doing that at
yeah,
Glendale when
every class was connected to an older class,
Nice.
and we had 2 of each grade, so it was perfect setup. And it was solid, like being a 1 year in grade 1 produced, like they did joint learning projects even. It didn't have to be like, you know, some fun creative thing. It was just like, if there's a curriculum similarity in an outcome in grade 4 and grade 1, let's get those 2 classes together, working together on that project. Because the curriculum does repeat itself several times. Like, can't remember how many maps of Canada Wyatt colored over his 12-year career, but it was at least double digit, you know. So yeah, in some contexts, it's built in opportunity. But when you start talking about having to transfer kids from one school to another, and it just gets really challenging.
Sure does, yeah. All right, next.
I guess back to Grow Boys. How do you think Grow Boys helps build identity, like during the actual program? Like in the long run?
My feeling on that is that it gives the whole cohort of Red Deer the chance to try at least 4 new activities, whatever it is, right? So maybe some of those kids don't have any sports, any arts, anything. They do it all as a hobby sort of thing. So it allows them, it exposes them to the opportunity to try something. And if it clicks and pings and resonates with them, then it, you know, we do connect them with the sources where they can pursue that further, sort of thing. So I think it helps contribute to identity formation because it gives them the opportunity to try it and hopefully try something that they like. And maybe they don't find, worst case scenario, which probably happens, they don't find anything they like, but at least they knock a few things off that they know they don't want to try, right?
Well, it exposes them to potentials, right?
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
It's an introduction to opportunities. Whether they pick up the ball and run with it or not, we don't have a lot of control over.
Yeah.
But we definitely promote that as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's, I think it.
And the program is very broad. Like, there's like 25-ish sessions running from, you know, hip hop, dance expression to the human library to self-defense to, athletic pursuits, aquatics, vision boarding. There's some real thinking things going on. So they are exposed to a broad spectrum of things, all under the headings of at least one, but hopefully more. So each session proposal has to fall under the context of respect, understanding relationships, or responsibility, any one or more of those. And then HOPE as an acronym, health, opportunity, privilege, and education. So, and the mantra is hope without action is wishful thinking. So we're trying to take an action to provide some exposure to potentials that they can pursue that will help nurture their expressive identity.
Pretty much wraps it up. Yep. Like it just, you broaden their horizon, you give them the chance to try new things. And I think everybody has propensities for some sort of activity, but if they're never given the chance to try that, then it will never manifest itself. Right?
Yeah.
So it gives them an opportunity to find out what potentials they have inside them that can manifest.
They jump off curbs all day, and sometimes you just nudge them a little bit.
Yeah. That's all I got there. You got any more?
Yeah, I guess another question I wanted to ask is how it kind of helps, like the program helps the transitional period between elementary and middle school.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to talk about
Sean
that.
will have much more to say on that.
But yeah, so what we set it up so that several of the, environmental conditions of middle school are mimicked or, like foreshadowed, I guess is the right word. So kids are traveling in groups of about what a class size in middle school would be. They're going to different places routinely all day and seeing different instructors all day. They're meeting new people. We intentionally mix up kids from different schools in the groups. So there's not ever going to be a case where one kid from a school is by himself. Mm-hmm. We make sure there's 2 or 3 from each school in each group, but they are having to meet and try and figure out how to, be comfortable in a diverse group of kids that they're not familiar with. So all of those conditions are confronting realities of going to grade 6. So we present them with those ideas a couple of months before they leave grade 5. So it's a great question. I feel like you observe that there has to be something there, and there certainly is, for sure. Those are all intentional things.
Yeah, and one of those is back to the formation of self-esteem. The strongest factor to that is positive feedback and positive reflective appraisals from other people, right? So during the day, they are exposed to a whole bunch of positive role models and are given the opportunity to, we train the mentors and orientate them that you have the power to make a difference in this kid's life.
Yeah.
So make sure that you take the time every kid in your clan, notice something they're doing well, notice something they're doing positive, and let them know.
Yeah.
Right? So it's giving them the opportunity to receive positive feedback.
Yeah, it's validating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you probably remember being in grade 5. When you're in grade 5, a kid in grade 12 might as well be Superman.
That's another part of it is,
Yeah.
and that's what I learned from doing that research. When we would go to I would take the high school kids to the grade 5 classroom, and I would stand back and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
But you should have seen, like, and I'm sure you have seen it, whatever. But it was super positive to see how much those kids lit up as soon as those high school kids walked in the door. So
how totally.
because they can connect with those kids in ways that I can't as an adult, right?
Yeah, there's also like, no, you're 100%, but there's also narratives that were totally unpredictable. Like, I'll give you an example. My son I think he was the second year as a participant, his second year of grade 5. Or the second year of Grow Kids was his grade 5 year. So he participated as a 5th grader. And then he came back in grade 9 and he was a clan family guide. And then he came back in grade 10 or 11. I think it might have been grade 11 as one of the living books in the living library. he had been diagnosed as type 1 diabetic a year before that. And it's a whole other story, but he ended up going to a professional cycling team camp in Athens, Georgia, the previous summer. 100% of his team is type 1 diabetic, Team Novo Nordisk. So that's how he presented himself as a living book. He wore his team jacket and he had his bike, and he just sat at a table and kids would come and he had a little presentation and he'd talk to them. So I walked in halfway through the morning just to say hi, see how it was going. And I saw 2 boys at his table and 2 women behind them. I thought, oh, those kids, why are those kids here with the EA, you know? So I walked up, I listened for a little while, kind of gave him a wink and thumbs up, everything's cool. So when I saw him at lunch, I said, hey, those 2 boys are really engaged with what you're saying, like, good job. And he goes, yeah, they're both diabetic, recently diagnosed. I'm like, what? Seriously? And those weren't EAs, they were their moms. Because within the week, they had both been diagnosed, totally random, they didn't even know each other. And their moms were so anxious about them going there on their own, about their insulin and all that stuff, that they decided to come as well and just be there with their sons. And so I caught up with one of the moms later. I say, hey, I want to thank you for coming and listening to my son. And she said, you don't even understand what that did for me and my son. But I'm just speaking for me. Hearing about your son and how he dealt with his diagnosis and what he's done with that has opened my eyes to the possibilities that my son has. And as a father, can you imagine the pride I felt at that? So there's narratives that just happen organically out of this day that none of us could predict or engineer. It's just good stuff, you know, that happens. And if I've heard one, I've heard 250 stories that, you know, that feel as good as that one from various people. So there's always that unanticipated positive consequence, and several of them happen every year. Yeah. The fact that we have girls come into our session is another one, and female mentors as well from the high school. So that was a good question.
Yeah, that was a great question. I guess to hit me with the question again.
How do you think Grow Boys, or the boys section of Grow Kids, helps the transition between elementary and middle school?
Right. So I think to answer that in like a broad, short way, the way that the program helps kids transition through that critical stage of development from early childhood to early adolescence is just by creating the opportunity for thousands of connections to exist in that one day that never would have happened without that day. So it just kind of creates the opportunity for connection amongst thousands of people.
That's true, yeah. It's almost like the summer camp concept.
A little bit, yeah. What else do you got?
Is there any other issues, I guess, like development issues, that you think Grow Kids could tackle or tackle better? Like, is there any other issues between that development period that Grow Kids maybe doesn't tackle?
That is a great question, and nothing's popping to mind yet. That it doesn't tackle?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, like it's not gonna, if there's a kid that's struggling with, like, you know, you were talking about attachment disorders or something like that, like that's rooted in early childhood development and has long-term lives on that. So it's not gonna fix any trauma that's happened up to that in earlier parts of the kid's life, but what it will help them do is hopefully help them develop resiliency factors or whatever, so that trauma affects them less later on in life. That's kind of what you got. Any other deeper thoughts on that?
I would answer that, like, in context, I think we cover all the bases. Like you say, we're not working in a clinical context, so it's not our purview to try and address those deeper seated psychological issues that lots of the kids that come manifest. We don't have the, that's not our purview. But so I think we do within our context, within the parameters we choose to operate, we cover all the bases. But I would also say that there are lots of opportunities that exist to enter into other contexts as well. Mm-hmm. Like I was talking about the block parent concept, creating content that can be applied to kids beyond grade 5 and before grade 5. So, like Grow Kids as a concept can operate really effectively in lots of different contexts. Because who's going to argue that it's not a good thing to try and raise happy, healthy, well-adjusted kids? So we're doing it in one context currently. We could do it in other contexts if the will exists.
Yeah, but it's not gonna, if somebody's suffering from schizophrenia, it's not gonna fix their schizophrenia.
No, we're not throwing somebody in the deep end who's afraid of water or confrontational therapy or anything like that. It's just, it's a very low key day in terms of like, we don't want people feeling anxiety that's debilitating just because they have to go to Grow Kids for the day. So I think the vast majority of kids go away from the day with positive takeaways.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess my last question will be about like other communities. Like, firstly, like, how do you think other communities could use this program to build a program of their own, and how could Grow Kids kind of help those other communities build more of these programs?
Well, it's already happened. The one we did in Zambia, this is pre-COVID. I was already working with a group of people that were supporting various village communities in continental Africa. This one was in Zambia. So the project that I was involved with is called Printernet. So we were providing seed money through crowdsource funding, $2,500 to buy a laptop and a printer. And if they could figure out how to get some kind of power source and an internet connection, we were communicating with them asynchronously online. And the idea was these villagers in really remote parts of Africa, they have historically native languages that you don't find on Google Translate. Mm-hmm. So one of the things they were highly interested in is learning English. So we were producing newsletters, Printernet newsletters, with their native language on one side and English translation on the other side. And it was sustainably funded through sponsorship advertising in the newsletter from local proprietors and business people. And an interesting thing happened. When COVID struck, we started to lose connection with people, and we didn't know what was going on, but literally they were dying or becoming ill and not able to communicate. So they started talking to us about this. We'd be up at 4 a.m. because it's like a 12-hour time difference, and say, well, so-and-so's sick. I'm like, oh my God, like COVID is in their community is what we really. So we started talking to them about things that they could do to protect themselves, like things that were automatic here, like wash your hands. So all of a sudden, the tailor who used to produce an ad revenue in their newsletter was now, we're putting instructions on how to sew your own mask. So for all I know, we could have saved many lives through this newsletter, which turned from a way to learn English into a way to survive the pandemic. So one of the connections that I made through that Printernet process was a teacher in Zambia. She ran her own private, sort of like an orphanage school. And she started asking about, she's doing her research. She found our website. So what is this Grow Boys all about? And so we explained, and they literally, I have the pictures on the website, on the blog. We gave them $250, which bought that exact shirt actually in several different colors. A local printer printed it. with locally sourced dye, and they literally ran their own conference just as we would, except for it was outdoors on dirt. You know,
Yeah.
like they don't have the same privileged resources and facilities that we do. And then so my connection through Printernet was also a teacher. She ran this school. She did her thing, and I haven't talked to her since the pandemic because that kind of threw a wrench in everything. So it, you know, I don't think people would need to do anything except rinse and repeat. Like the issues that kids are faced with are pretty universal, like geographically speaking. So, but I mean, like we've provided a foundational concept. They could run with it in a local context any way they want because the structure is solid. You know, like they could build from it in the local context. I don't think it would be hard. It's already happened. So.
Yeah, I would. Lee and I kind of rabbit hole down this one a little bit too. Hit me with the question again to make sure I stay in the right lane. How do we help other communities?
Yeah, or help
Yeah.
communities learn from grow kids or help replicate it, I guess.
Okay, well, yeah, so the part of that is this podcast. The number one purpose of this podcast is, first off, to raise awareness that if we want to take a preventative approach to mental health, we got to focus on that transitional period and helping kids cope with it, right? Raising awareness of that, and then hopefully inspiring people to do Grow Kids programs in other schools, in other communities, like
Other
across the
districts, yeah.
province, country, and globe is kind of my vision, right? And I guess maybe one thing we could do is kind of like form a web page or a consultative team, so that if somebody in anywhere on the planet is like, hey, I want to do this, I don't quite know how to do it though, right? Like I
Yeah.
gotta, so then somebody on our team they could reach out to, because the framework is pretty basic, right? Like
Well,
as far as how you structure the handling of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's you take your kids in that age range from 10 to 12 sort of thing, split them into however many you got in your community, find a facility to run the program, split them into groups of 10 to 30, you know, work with a mentor to mentee ratio of 3 to 5 mentors per mentee, and figure out constructive programs and interactive programs for them to do. That's the framework, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a
sharing
highly-
that and you know, if we had a committee of people that, so if somebody reached out to, oh, somebody just messaged and wants support developing their own Grow Kids Day. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's got the time this week to be a consultant for that person? That would be one thing we could do that doesn't exist yet, right?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I was on my way to Africa before the pandemic hit to consult with them in person, and a couple of the Printernet people. We had that plan, but obviously it didn't happen. I should mention that the Hope Wheel is the symbolic representation of a different thing that I'm involved with called Hope Alliance. And as time goes on, like I'm not going to be in the education world forever. So I don't want this to, you know,
Fizzle out.
disappear.
Yeah.
So I've structured the Grow Kids sort of branding underneath the Hope Alliance umbrella. So the numbered company that Hope Alliance is registered as, the reason I set it up that way, so I didn't do a name search for Hope Alliance or anything like that. I really don't care if somebody else uses the name, because the numbered company allows me to brand it in several different contexts. So under Hope Alliance, one of the things is Grow Kids. Another one is caregivers. And, you know, there's several others. Hope Alliance coaching. So like I got 517 people in my LinkedIn group in less than 2 years just by randomly connecting with people. And I know for a fact that a lot of them would be highly interested in this concept and the opportunity to host a Grow Kids event where they come from. There's a lot of teachers in the group. There's a lot of social workers in the group. There's a lot of child psychologists in the group. John Cita, one of the people who I idolize in the industry, who wrote Kids Who Outwit Adults, is in the group. So there's lots of opportunity to create ripple effects and connect with people literally around the globe already. We just need that meeting to decide that this is something important we want to do.
That's right.
I've been setting up this structure for 10 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I got between 10 and 20,000 people a month read the caregivers blog. And I haven't written anything there since last March. So we have connections. It's just, you know, throwing it down for them and seeing if they want to be involved or not. Yeah. Structure's there. Concept is 13,000-year-old concept.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It appeals to Indigenous people around the globe because of the worldview that we base our philosophy in. You know, medicine will. So,
does that cover your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. You got any closing thoughts you want to kind of finish off with, Sean?
No, it's good. We're good.
Yeah, I think
we covered a lot of ground there. It's Miller time.
Anything I got to say, I've said numerous times already.
No, but I appreciate the opportunity. Like, this is outstanding, just to sit and be able to put this out on YouTube or wherever it ends up. You know, this is a really cool thing.
Yeah,
that we're doing.
I'm super excited with it. Yeah. So I agree. Well, thanks so much for lending your voice and expertise to it. Sure. And
you bring a protege with you too. So
exactly.
We're literally living what we speak here. I do remember you from Glendale. You had shorter hair back then.
Yes.
Okay, well, that wraps it up with Sean here. So the next episode and the next chapter, because this is a podcast with a little bit of a storyline to it, you'll be meeting my research mentor, Dr. Greg Wells, who I worked underneath him doing 2 years of research on cross-age peer mentorship programs. He's going to talk about a ton of fascinating stuff, with one of them being that I'm super excited to learn about, because he's, you know, PhD level guy. So he's been in academia his whole career, is the benefits of cross-age interaction. That's his wheelhouse. So he's going to have a lot of interesting things to say about that. Let me take another run at that sentence. He's going to have a lot of interesting things. I think my tongue is going on strike. He's going to have a lot of interesting things to say about that. So stay tuned for episode 5, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
We're done.